Eject test. 1, 2. Eject test.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can. Let me turn my volume up. It's low. Try that again.
Yeah, can you hear me or now?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, cool. You look great from this in sound. You've seen the presentation.
I'm sorry?
Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, I see. Thank you, sponsors.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that should be great. Um, uh, so whenever you want to advance the slides, the moderator in the room can do it for you.
Okay,
So just let her know.
sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. Just be ready 5 minutes before, and then we'll clear out the screen.
Okay,
Cool. Thanks, Lloyd.
okay.
Did they get the clicker? Oh yeah. Did you not show it? No. Okay. How do I do it? So green is forward, red is backwards. Okay. Pretty simple. We'll have your slides on here for you. Okay. It'll show up there. And then once Dr. Potter gets on, they have instructed him to tell you when to advance. Oh, okay. Slides, so you'll just advance them for him. Okay. Do you know how many slides he has? All right. All right. Oh, I didn't know you had slides, so this is good. All right. And then after you do your introduction and stuff, if you want to come sit down. All right. Thank you much. Okay. Just before I got everything started. Good morning. So yesterday there was somebody in here who kept talking about UT Austin, and so I feel like I just need to say howdy. Thank you. So I did want to thank you all for coming back today for a second day, and thank our sponsors, of course, for making this happen. But most of all, with everything that's gone on with COVID and with all of those restrictions, and then with Snowmageddon and having to change everything at the last minute, I want to again give a round of applause to our chamber leaders, to Kelly, to Henry, to Jill, to Shelby. Y'all, this has been an amazing group to work with. And, you know, we've heard it over and over. We're one of the only groups who has done this. We are indeed the trailblazers of East Texas, and we're so thankful and lucky, fortunate to have the leaders that we have in East Texas. So because of some of those problems, some of those challenges that we've had to be flexible and overcome, as you know, the governor was supposed to be here today. But unfortunately, because of all of the changes, he does send his apologies. He's not going to be able to make it. But for those of us in East Texas, it's kind of created a little bit of an advantage. Don't tell the governor I said that, because we get to hear from Todd Staples later today. And if you're like me, like I'm a huge Todd Staples fangirl, so we're really, really, really fortunate because the former senator, the former commissioner of agriculture, the current director of the Texas Oil and Gas Association, Todd Staples, will be with us. And then after that, we're going to have a keynote from the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. So thank you, Senator Hughes, for helping to make that happen. As you all know, the lieutenant governor is one of the most powerful people in the state. And so he is going to be here to address us as well. So we're not going to get to hear from the governor, but we do have two excellent folks to come in. So that's sort of the looking forward for our agenda. Also, I'm supposed to tell y'all again where the restrooms are. I hope that you still remember from yesterday. If you don't, I'm a little bit worried about what you did last night. So the restrooms are outside to the left, so you can find the restrooms there. And also, let's please be polite to our speakers and to Dr. Potter, who's going to be joining us virtually, and silence your cell phones. I know you probably think that you've already done it, but just get it out and check one more time, please. Personal favor for me. So I think that is all of the housekeeping. If I've missed something, I'm sure that Kelly or Henry or somebody will like jump up and down and let me know. So we are going to get on to our presentation for right now. It is redistricting. And so I'll be honest, I'm sort of an education policy wonk. I'm not a redistricting expert, but when Kelly asked me to do this, I'm also just sort of a public policy nerd. And so I was like, well, let's find out a little bit more about redistricting. And so, first of all, I know any graphic designers in the room are going to hate this slide. It's a little bit busy, but the map, I was like, for redistricting, we're going to be talking a lot about maps. And so does anybody know what that map is and why it is especially important today of all days? Mary Elizabeth, you can't answer. Texas, thank you, Shelby. It is Texas Independence Day. That is a map of the original Republic of Texas that we gained our independence today at the Battle of San Jacinto on March the 2nd, 1836. So your history lesson for all of the proud Texans in the room. So that has nothing to do with the Longhorns, actually. Giga Maggies. I mean, like, let's just go for that. So when you think about redistricting, so there's this place, it's called the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL. So if you're ever given a task from Kelly Hall at the last minute and she says, Laura, can you moderate this? And you need to find out something about public policy, go to ncsl.org. They have all the greatest information. So I did do a little primer on redistricting. And so there are only two sort of rules that the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 tell us we have to abide by with redistricting. And that is you have to have districts that are roughly equal in population, and they cannot be intentionally or inadvertently discriminate on the basis of race. So that's all you have to have. But then there are these additional criteria that states often use in redistricting. And so you can see the list there. The things that I want you to remember are compact and contiguous, because I have some examples of what some states have done. Compact. What do y'all think about that district in Florida? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, and there you think that there are some core like groups, you know, of neighborhoods there who share values. This is Illinois. So, you know, we're hitting that contiguous standard, but I just think these are kind of fun to look at. But this is my favorite, this one in North Carolina. Check out that district that goes from, what is that, Charlotte, and then it has a little bitty line and it takes it all the way up to Greensboro. So those are just some examples that I thought were kind of fun as I was looking through this redistricting stuff. But fortunately, you do not have to rely on me to be your expert, because we have two of the greatest experts right here in this room. One of them is Dr. Lloyd Potter. He is our state demographer. He was appointed to that position in 2010. He is also a professor at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where he serves as the director of the Texas Demographic Center. And so in that job, he produces population estimates and projections for the state of Texas. In addition, we have our own Senator Bryan Hughes here, and I'm not going to bore y'all with his bio because you all know it, you all know him, but I will say that one thing I was really thankful, some people that we know really well, Senator, said that you really missed your calling, that you were supposed to be a pastor. And so yesterday I was talking to Courtney and another moderator, and that moderator was a little bit nervous about, he was like, well, I don't know if I have enough questions to take up all my time. And I said, well, you know, I don't have to worry about that because Bryan Hughes is on my panel. And so if we have a little bit of extra time, I'll just ask him to pray us out, and that'll take up the rest of our time. So, so we're very fortunate to have you because you do serve on the redistricting committee. And so we can talk a little bit about that. So at this time, I am going to take my questions and I will join you down here. All right, is this working? All right, so Senator, we are going to start with you. And I'm going to ask you to just briefly describe the redistricting process in Texas.
Okay. Well, good morning. Good to see everybody again. It's again great to be able to get together, and especially under these circumstances. So, wow. Redistricting process every 10 years, of course, after that census. And the concept is they used to say one man, one vote, and now we say one person, one vote, which is appropriate because not just men vote. Amen to that, right? So it's one person, one vote. And of course, the fundamental concept is that the district should be of the same size. Mayor, if you're in a district with 2 people and Dr. Jackson's in a district with 10 people, they each get to elect 1 rep, then your vote counted more than hers. That wouldn't be fair. Not that we wouldn't want you to have a more powerful vote, but everybody should be in districts of the same size. And so that's why it has to be done. Invariably, it becomes a political process, or it's accused of becoming a political process, whether or not it is. And so, but that's basically it. The Constitution provides for it, right, every 10 years. And so we have to wait on the feds to get that census data. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. For Texas House and Senate lines that are somewhat important to me, and many of us, those districts have to be generally the same size. We have, and boy, Dr. Potter's probably cringing as I start talking about numbers or anything. He's so gracious. He'll correct me nicely, but those Texas House and Senate lines have to be within, basically, there can be a 10% standard deviation between the smallest and the largest. So they've got to be pretty close to the same size. But for the U.S. Congress, for those U.S. House of Representative seats, those districts have to be balanced perfectly to a person. So we'll get the number. The first time I went through redistricting, it was 651,619 or 651,620. Every district in Texas had to have one of those 2 numbers. Of course, it's somewhat odd because we're using numbers that are already old when we draw those lines, but we have to split blocks and tracts and not households, but neighborhoods. So it can be kind of tricky, but they used to do it with a map, and they'd put plastic over the map. They'd use a grease pencil, and they'd have a calculator to try to balance all that population. Computers help a whole lot now, but it's still a fun process.
Great. Thank you for that. So Dr. Potter, I think the senator just sort of set you up. And so I'm going to ask you to sort of describe a little bit more about what you do and what your role is in the redistricting process. And I understand you also have a presentation here.
Sure, I do have some slides, though we don't have to go through them. I kind of always have data and pictures and tables. And Senator Hughes, good to be with you. I remember you weren't a senator last time you did this, but certainly were very engaged and certainly have provided very solid leadership, not just for redistricting, but for many things in the state. And I certainly appreciate your service to the state. So it's good to be with you. Sorry I couldn't be physically with you all today. So I will go through and just talk about a few things. I'll try to go pretty quickly. I apologize, Senator Hughes, because you probably have heard some of this several times because we've been in many redistricting hearings together. So if you could just advance to the next slide, and I'll just talk a little bit. So the census 2020, as many of you know, we had a number of challenges with it because of the pandemic. But the census data are used for reapportionment of the House. That determines how many U.S. congressional seats we get, or the states get. It's used, then the data are also used to redraw districts, congressional districts, and so on. And then the census data are used for distributing federal resources. Next slide. So there are a number of important dates, and one of them has to do with when the apportionment data are given to us, and that determines how many U.S. congressional seats we have. It also will determine the size of all the districts that Senator Hughes was just talking about. So once we get that number, then you can determine what the size of each district, the target size of each district needs to be. But so because of the pandemic, there was a delay in getting the apportionment file to the president. It's now targeted before April 30th to have that released. And then the next release is the redistricting data, and those are the data that the senators and the representatives get their hands dirty with. Because that has the block level data that they use for drawing the district lines. That file has been delayed now to, they're saying they'll be released by September 30th. And so many of you are aware the Texas House and Senate will be out of session by then. And so that we're likely to have a special section for redistricting by the time that's released. And then I'll go on to the next slide and I'll try to move along here. So when we look at Texas, we've grown more than any other state. We've added, if you look at the second or the third column from the right, numeric change, you see we've added 4.2 million Texans over the course of the decade. And we're growing faster than most other states. Utah is the only state growing faster than us, growing a little more than 16.8%. And if all these numbers hold true, so the 2020 estimate is not the census count, it's an estimate of what the population is. Texas is likely to gain 3 US congressional seats. Next slide. And so we're trying to estimate what the size of districts are likely to be. If you look at the last 2 columns there, there's the 29,360,000, that's the Census Bureau's estimate. Our at the Texas Demographic Center have a projection of the 2020 population being 29,677,000. So we think the true census count number will be somewhere in between there, but we don't know yet until the apportionment file is released. But if it's in there, then these are the sizes of the Texas Senate districts, and then also the US congressional seats will be about this size. So these are the size of the districts that our congressmen will be trying to get their districts to fit. Next slide. Okay, that's just showing you numeric change. You can see the population triangle of Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin was growing a lot. You can, if you look at East Texas, there are some counties that were, go to the next slide. I think I have it zoomed in on East Texas. So if you look here at East Texas, you can see some counties growing, some growing a lot. Certainly Tyler is kind of and Smith County is the county that's growing the most there. But some counties are losing population also. Next slide. And then the pace of population change. This is how fast their population is growing. If you look at the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can see the suburban ring counties are the ones that are really growing quickly. If you look way out west, Loving County, I think, has a little over 100 people. So if they add 10, they're growing really fast. Next slide is zooming in here on East Texas. So again, you can kind of see the eastern part of, the western part of District 1 is kind of where most of the growth is, and a couple of counties, a few counties losing population. Next slide. I'm going to skip through these just in the interest of time. This just kind of highlighting the speed of growth. So let's move through these, and I think that's all we got then. Okay. So if you want to go, I guess maybe turn that, you could turn then I'm done. So essentially, there are a number of things that I think are important for people to be aware of. One is that on our website, the Texas Demographic Center, we have some resources that are available that have data on how population has changed within Senate districts. You're welcome to go and look at that. And then the other thing is the Census Bureau has information if people are concerned about undercount, about contesting the count. And so that's something too that we've seen in Texas historically. Some areas have contested their count, and sometimes the census, if you provide enough evidence or the kind of evidence they need, they'll make changes to the census count to bring your population up to what you think it truly is. So I'll stop there and see if either of you have any questions or other things we want to talk about.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I did have one question. And so, you've obviously done a lot of work in the numbers and showing us where the growth is and all of that. With current data analytics software, could somebody like Phil Burks or Mayor Wansley over there create a software program and just have it spit out our districts?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that are really good at spitting out districts, and and putting in different criteria. And the software has been developed now that really will allow you to do that. So certainly you can go and, I think I'm guessing there are people that are doing this now with data that are currently available. The data that are available, though, are going to have noise in it, are not going to be the redistricting file. So there are going to have to be adjustments made when the redistricting data are released. But there are, just putting in, there are programs and there are geographic information specialists that can do a lot of pretty sophisticated things in terms of defining districts these days.
So I guess, Senator, we'll move to you. Why wouldn't we, with all of the technology we have now, like how do we insert the humans into the process, and kind of how does that work?
That's a great question, because it seems very complicated the way the legislature does it, the way all legislatures do it. Of course, the population is not the only factor. You talked about the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the cases going with that, and going back to the Constitution. Of course, we have to make sure we're required to look at racial makeup of districts. And it's interesting, under the federal law is sort of disjointed over this. Certain sections of the law tell us not to look at race. Other sections tell us that we must consider race. And so, for example, if a district has a majority minority makeup, that is, the majority of the citizens in a district are from a minority population, then that can't be diluted. And there's what's called packing, where sometimes in some of those maps you were looking at, they'll take all folks from a certain minority group and put them all in one district, so they can't have more influence than one. Other times they're accused of spreading them out, so they can't have a majority anywhere. So those federal legal and federal constitutional requirements require us to look at this. And there's also communities of interest, right? We know from back home, we know what communities have things in common and which ones don't. And so if we just did a pure balancing of the population, the lines would be pretty arbitrary. We'd probably be not happy with them. So it's a messy process. It's interesting, you didn't ask about this, but some states have flirted with the idea of a nonpartisan redistricting commission. Have y'all heard about this? We get emails about this from time to time, and it sounds appealing to take the politics out of redistricting. The practical problem is it is impossible to take the politics out of redistricting, because the people appointed to that independent redistricting commission, they're political people. There's an equal number of people from each political party. They're political people just like the folks you elect. The difference is, under the current system, when the legislature does it, we're accountable to you. You get to elect us, unelect us, so you don't like what we did. Those independent redistricting commissions make the process even more in the dark. There's even less influence by the people. So the process we have is messy, but we believe the legislature, who's elected by the people, should be the one drawing the lines.
And so we've mentioned that you are on the redistricting committee for the Senate. And so I know that y'all have been over the interim, maybe doing some hearings around the state and maybe planning some more around the states. What's the purpose of that? What do you gain from those hearings that help you in your decision-making process?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So 2003 was my first session, and we took up congressional redistricting at that time. In 2011, I was in the House, and now this time. And so that's right. Normally, we travel around the state, and in fact, we'll have hearings in different regions so that local folks can participate. Sometimes it's hard to get to Austin, and so local folks will say, for example, when I was first elected to the House, I represented Camp County, which is Pittsburgh. I did not represent Titus County, which is Mount Pleasant. And if you've been up there, you know that that's really one community, right? Because of Pilgrim's Pride and various things, those counties really ought to be in one district, and they are now. But they weren't for a long time. So you don't really know that unless you come there, have a hearing, listen to local folks, find out what's important to them. Maybe a lot of people work at this one plant, and so they live in multiple communities, but that kind of ties them together. Maybe it's a hospital, maybe it's a university. So by going around and getting that testimony, you find out what local issues matter to people. Yes, some of those hearings took place around the state. We had that, what was that thing last year, that the COVID-19 last year, they messed everything up. There's such a long list of difficult things, but COVID-19 happened last year. And so we did not get to travel around the state to have those hearings as we would have liked to. So they're being done virtually. So that's been going on over the last couple of months in the Senate. So the redistricting committee is in the Senate chamber, and we're set up virtually like this. And we announce ahead of time, okay, you're in South Texas. This is your day. Go online, tell us what you think. And anyone can participate from anywhere, but we try to do it regionally. And again, that allows us to get local input. And it's all part of the process. You know, we're going to do this in a way that's fair and that's constitutional. And so that's part of the process.
And so earlier, Senator Hughes, you mentioned that, the packing of districts or the, spreading them out to dilute representation occasionally, people at least accuse folks of doing that. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But we think about, whenever we think about that, a lot of times we think about it in the context of Republican versus Democrat. But there are also some rural versus urban issues with this. When we look at the statistics that Dr. Potter showed us, we saw that where the growth was and we saw where the growth was not. And so can you talk a little bit about that rural versus urban dynamic of redistricting and how that can influence us in East Texas?
You bet. So if we think of the heart of redistricting as one person, one vote, then the districts follow the people. I guess that's axiomatic. We understand that. And so though our part of the state largely is growing, we're not growing as fast as those Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin suburbs. And so more of the districts get drawn that way. And so, for example, with the Texas House, in the 2011 redistricting cycle, House District 3, which at that time was in Lamar County, Paris, and Hopkins County, Sulphur Springs, and Rains County, and also Van Zandt County, that district disappeared. Why is that? Because we have only 150 House seats. They've got to be allocated based on population. And there was so much growth in the Houston suburbs that district in Northeast Texas just went away and reappeared down around Houston. So they got one, we lost one. So not our immediate area of the communities in this room, but in Northeast Texas, we're not growing as fast as the rest of the state, as Dr. Potter showed us. Now, we don't have the problem that West Texas has where they are seriously shrinking in population. So what that means is, though, we think about reallocating those 150 Texas House seats and those 31 Texas Senate districts and those congressional seats, they're going to follow the population. So it's a challenge we have in rural areas because as more population grows in urban and suburban areas, more seats are there. Dr. Potter was talking about those congressional districts. I know you understand this process, but I'll risk insulting your intelligence. So for the U.S. Congress, 435 seats, right? I think they were adding seats every year around the 1920s. Maybe they froze it at 435, and then we just reallocate those seats based on population, right? And so that's why states that are growing like Texas get more congressional representation. It's interesting, that process where they reallocate those seats every 10 years, California gained congressional seats every cycle, every census that was done for decades and decades and decades. And then in the 2011 cycle, California broke even. That was the first time they didn't gain U.S. House seats. And you saw Dr. Potter's map, they're going to lose this time. We're not happy about that. We're kind of happy about that. But the point is, as that population comes to Texas, so we expect to pick up, I guess, 3, Dr. Potter, maybe a couple for Florida. I was looking at your numbers. So Texas, we hope will go from 36 members of the U.S. House to 39 members of the U.S. House. So what does that mean? A couple of things. It's good for Texas. It also means that as we gain those 3 U.S. House seats in Texas, we have more to go around and more representation for us in rural and suburban urban areas. And the good news for us in this room, if you think about the numbers, Smith County, Gregg County, primarily represented here, those have a big enough population that those communities will be anchoring, obviously, Texas House districts, Texas Senate districts, and congressional districts. So we're going to be watching this and making sure it's done constitutionally, legally, and fairly. The good news is the communities represented here are big enough that we will have a good voice in that process.
And so continuing on sort of about the rural-urban divide and an issue that came up last night that's sort of tangential to redistricting is we heard about some proposed legislation that might consolidate our appellate courts into the urban areas. So right now, for example, we have the 12th Court of Appeals where Justice Worthen serves, and he represents the majority of our counties here. And there's some proposed legislation that might take that and put it into a Dallas court is the way I understand it. So can you talk to us about that and what that might mean for us? And if we're concerned about that representation, what can we do about it?
it's something we're all watching pretty closely. And so right now there are 14 Court of Appeal districts in Texas. And that's right. Most of us live in the 12th Court of Appeals, colloquially called the Tyler Court of Appeals. That's where it's based. Some of us are, and we're close to the Texarkana Court of Appeals, the 6th Court of Appeals, based just north of us. And we talked about one person, one vote, and how each district's got to be about the same size. Well, that applies to legislative districts, right? Folks who are going to be passing laws to represent you. Those rules, one person, one vote, equalized districts, those rules do not apply to judicial districts. Now, the Voting Rights Act still applies. You can't discriminate. Of course, we're not going to do that. There are still rules, but that equalizing of the districts based on population, that is not required in judicial districts. So Justice Worthen, the chief, is quite the historian of the development of courts appeals in Texas. He's published on this topic. And the law says that we're supposed to redraw those lines after we do the legislative lines. But it's been how many years, Your Honor, since it's been a 40 or so or thereabouts? Okay, it's been a while. So again, we like the system just like it is. I'm not trying to mess with that, but there is a big push to redraw those lines because it's been so long since it was done. And our concern is that we get stuck in a mega district that maybe it's Dallas suburbs coming out to us. Now, we haven't seen a map yet. We've heard talk about this. There's been a lot of discussion. We haven't seen the map. And so we're watching it pretty closely. I'm talking to my judges a lot and to folks back home. So once we see a map, if there in fact is one, if this moves forward, we're just going to have to look at it and make sure that folks that we represent are going to be protected. So I wish I knew more about it. It's been sort of in the background, but it may be moving forward pretty quickly.
Thank you for that. So Dr. Potter, I'm going to go back to you, and I apologize. You may have included this on your slides, but I just wanted to, if you did, highlight the fact of how many folks are in congressional districts now in Texas, and how many folks are in state Senate districts and House districts. What are the numbers that each of those represent? Do you know? Do you have that data?
I don't have it in front of me. Senator Hughes may remember from, because it's the same size as it was back when he was involved in it in 2011. But
I got it. We cheated. Yeah. We looked at your info, but we got this from you. But I know you, and you memorized so many of these numbers. I've never seen you stumped. This is a big deal. This is that's right. And he's not really stumped. Listen, we're thankful for Dr. Potter. I mean, the work he does affects just about everything that we do, and we act on your behalf. So if my numbers are right, so a Texas Senate district today has about 815,000. Based on the 2011 census. And again, it'll have about 950,000 once we get those new numbers based on those estimates Dr. Potter was talking about. A Texas House district will go from 168,000 to 197,000. To give you some perspective, I'm sorry about all these numbers, but if you look around the country, look at other states, not Texas, but those other states, the average state House member has about 60,000 constituents. And the average state senator has about 175, 180,000. So yes, that's right. In Texas, a House district is bigger than the average Senate district. And in Texas, our districts are bigger than anybody else's, except for California. Doggone it. Theirs are still a little bigger than ours. So that'll be the new numbers. And then for Congress, again, if Texas picks up those three that Dr. Potter was talking about, and you had, of course, as you said, there'll be about 757,000. I think now a congressional district has about 701,000 people. And I'm relying on Dr. Potter and on Cody Terry from our team, who's the redistricting expert. He knows how to use that software and crunch these numbers. So districts get a whole lot bigger. But since we're gaining those 3 congressional seats, that kind of mitigates that a little bit in Texas. They don't get quite as much. So we've already got more constituents in a congressional seat, but we'll have a few more after that.
mm-hmm.
Right. I did want to highlight that. So when you think about Congress and then state Senate and then House Rep, our senator right here represents, from a legislative standpoint, represents more people than anybody else in that legislative process. And so the state senators, because they are confined to 31 in the state of Texas, he has more constituents than a congressman, and obviously than a state rep, since those are smaller districts. But so state senators here in Texas are pretty powerful folks.
Pay is still $600 a month, so that's all right. But thank you. Thank you, though. Thanks, Doctor.
So, Senator, what happens if the legislature is unable to pass a map for the state Senate and House districts?
Great question. So what if we don't do it? Because we have an election coming up next year, right, where the line's going to be. And so, like everything with the redistricting, it's complicated. And I know I'm so glad Dr. Potter's here to, if I mess this up, but two different tracks. So the redistricting map, it's a bill just like any other bill. So it's got to pass the House, got to pass the Senate, got to be signed by the governor. If at any point that breaks down and we get through the regular session and we don't have a redistricting map, then the law says, and I'm going to shorten some of this, but the law says that for the Texas House and the Texas Senate, those lines will be drawn by the Legislative Redistricting Board. Well, who in the world is that? Well, it's Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, Land Commissioner, Attorney General, and Comptroller. Did I get that right?
I think
Anyway,
that's right. Yeah.
oh, thank you, Dr. Fine. All right, thank you. And so it's statewide elected officials. So they are the ones who will draw the lines for the Texas House and the Texas Senate if the legislature fails to do it. And it's even more complicated because the Constitution says we have to draw the lines in the first regular session after we receive the data, and we're not going to get the data till after the regular session. But the backstop for those Texas House and Senate lines is that Legislative Redistricting Board. Those are all statewide elected officials except for the Speaker. He's elected by the House, of course. And this time, those are all Republicans. In the past, there's been some Republicans, some Democrats. So those state lines would be drawn by the statewide elected officials. What about U.S. Congress? Those U.S. congressional lines, and you know this, the state legislatures draw those U.S. congressional lines for their states. The Legislative Redistricting Board cannot draw those lines. And so we would, if we didn't get that done in a regular session or a special session or 2 or 3 or however many it takes, if we didn't get those lines drawn, they would likely end up being drawn by a federal court. Now, I really like federal judges. In case any are watching, federal judges are great. And it's an important constitutional role. They're appointed by the president for life. But I think most of us agree we'd rather have those lines drawn by people you elect, and not by the judicial branch. So if we don't get it done, the federal courts could get involved. But Lord willing, we're going to get it done.
And so you've talked a little bit about this, that the COVID delays that we've experienced are going to push us back. And so because we aren't going to have those numbers that Dr. Potter's talked to us about. And so what might happen if we have to have a special session to draw those congressional districts with, how might that affect our elections in the future?
So Dr. Potter, did you say April now is the magic date for census to get the data to the president?
The end of April, yeah.
End of April. Okay, and then we hope it'll get to us.
For the
to the White House, and then
for apportionment, it's the end of April, right? And then
okay.
for redistricting, the end of September.
Okay, so then end of September, that official data is released, that census tract data where we know where people live, which we need to draw those lines. So if we don't get that till September, many of us here run for office. Normally, if you're going to run for office in 2022, you would file your paperwork. There's Chairman Stein back there who takes some of that paperwork. You would file in December of 2021. That's coming up. If we're not even starting to draw the line till October of 2021, we could have a problem. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we could easily be in a situation where some of that stuff gets pushed back because we don't have the data in time. We don't get the bills passed in time. We don't know that. And we're optimistic everything's going to be on track. We're going to get it done. But we could see some delays. Some of y'all will recall in the 2012 cycle. It's been so long ago. In the 2012 cycle, remember, we started the process. People filed for office in December of 2011. And then there was some litigation about the lines. Remember that? And the primary got put off. It was put off by 3 or 4 months. And so we don't want that to happen, but we've seen that happen in the past. So we could see some disruption in the election process. We don't know that. And again, we plan to get this done in plenty of time, but it's a possibility we could see some delays, some of those dates get pushed back.
So Dr. Potter, whenever we looked at your bio, and it says that you are our state's demographer and that you're also the director of the Texas Demographic Center. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that, about what you do on a day-to-day basis? And then in addition to that, we heard yesterday on our healthcare panel that a lot of resources are drawn to areas based on population and based on the census data that you've told us about. And so talk to us a little bit about that and what the census numbers mean, and so the importance of the work that you do.
Sure. So I'm the state demographer. I'm appointed by the governor and nominated by the lieutenant governor and speaker. And the Texas Demographic Center used to be called the State Data Center, but there's a state data center that has computers in it, and we were getting a lot of calls from them. So we rebranded to be called the Texas Demographic Center. And that's cut down on the calls for people needing software assistance and so on. So we have some support. We're based within the University of Texas at San Antonio. We have an office in the Stephen F. Austin building, which is right next to the Bob Bullock Museum, and have a few staff there, and I'm there a lot, though not today. And so we are charged with producing population estimates and projections for the state. So we produce population estimates in all the years. Actually, we do it in census years, but so we know what the population looks like beyond the census. When we get to 2025, we'll estimate what the population is at the county level and at city level, we call it place level. And we do that with demographic detail, meaning age, sex, and race and ethnicity. And so we do that. And then we also produce population projections for the state. And we do that every other year. And the projections we carry out 40 years. And we do that with demographic detail, but we only do that at the county level. And there's a number of reasons for that. In addition to that, we're the liaison for the state to the Census Bureau. So we work closely with Census Bureau staff. We work very closely with them in the efforts to execute the census, along with Secretary of State's office, Secretary Hughes, who she provided some, came in kind of late in the game. I don't know if you recall the shift in the Secretary of State. She came in kind of late in the process of the census, but she jumped right in along with her staff and really helped organize a lot of state agencies. And we worked with her and other state agencies around things. And then also with local organizations, county judges, trying to get people aware and engaged in the census. But then our other part of this has to do with dissemination and consultation with state agencies, with senators, representatives and their staff, the governor's office, and then anybody that asks. I mean, I've been to Tyler multiple times, talking about issues related to demographics in East Texas. I think usually it's a chamber that's very interested in what's happening demographically. So we work closely at the local level in terms of trying to help people be aware of what's happening demographically and what they can expect to happen. We do have a small amount of money that comes from the legislature that comes to the University of Texas at San Antonio that supports a few of our staff members, but essentially much of it is somewhat subsidized by, in my time, for example, I don't even get $600 a month. But, I mean, I do get paid, but I get paid as a faculty member. I don't get paid as the state demographer.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So, Senator, I'm just going to see, is there anything else that you wanted to add to this discussion? What are we missing here?
No, this is so good having Dr. Potter here, and thank y'all for putting this together. So process-wise, I know this can be kind of dry, and a lot of y'all are numbers people, but I want to give you a picture of what it's like when we get to the end of the session, when this works like it's supposed to. So those congressional districts, they affect every one of us, and that's going to be hard fought, hard negotiated. Of course, we see Congressman Gohmert all the time, and we're thankful for our whole Texas delegation. But if you remember the House or the Senate during this session, you're going to hear a whole lot from your congressman, because those poor guys, their destiny is in our hands. We're going to be drawing their line. So they're going to come see you, and they're going to be around a lot, which is good. We love seeing them, and we love working with those guys. But so that's the U.S. congressional map. It's going to be hardly negotiated, strongly negotiated. It's going to be fair, constitutional. Then those Texas Senate and House maps, there's sort of an etiquette there. Obviously, we're going to follow the law and the Constitution. And then the Texas House is going to work out in the Texas House what they want that map to look like. So Representative Schaefer, Representative Hefner, Representative Dean, and the folks in our area, they're going to work with leadership of the House, with their colleagues. They're going to come up with a map that they like. And whatever the House agrees to for the Texas House map, they're going to send over to the Senate. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, I'm listening to you guys. We're going to come up with a map that we like, and we're going to send it to the House. And the etiquette is whatever map they send us for the House, Texas House, we're going to pass. Whatever map we send them for the Texas Senate, they're going to pass. But it's sort of a trust but verify thing, right? So the tradition is on that day when we're passing those redistricting bills, they open up the door to the Senate chamber and to the House chamber. Lieutenant Governor's presiding over the Senate. The Speaker's presiding over the House, and they can look through the rotunda and just barely see each other, right? It's as unusual. This never happens except once every decade or so. And so when we're about to vote on the map for the Texas House and they're about to vote on the map for the Texas Senate, the motion is made, then the doors are opened, and Lieutenant Governor and Speaker, moving somewhat in unison, will raise their gavels and pass the bill at the same time. Sort of like when, you know, Mayor, you're releasing the money when they give you the stuff. I don't mean illegal stuff. I mean a deal. I mean like a transaction, you know. I didn't mean that. He doesn't do that stuff. The Texas mayors don't do that. And so, but the point is, they pass them at the same time. It's kind of neat to watch. And I don't know what would happen if one was to hold back and not hit the gavel. But anyway, hopefully we'll get to see that this time. But again, we're going to follow the law. We've got the law is pretty clear. We're going to follow it. We're listening to folks back home, and we're blessed to live in an area that is growing, and that helps us a lot. But even folks in West Texas, they're going to have their voices represented. But I'm glad we live where we live. We got a good delegation. You've got some good seniority, which helps in this process. So it's going to be done right. It may take a little while, but we're going to get it done. And thank you guys for trusting us. This is a big deal. We want to make sure we get it right.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Dr. Potter, for being here today. We really appreciate it, and joining us from San Antonio virtually. And whoever that was too, thank them on our behalf.
Thanks, Dr. Potter.
So with that, we will close this panel and just remind you all to be back, I believe at 9:30. Is that right, Henry? 9:30 for Todd Staples. So we'll hear about our energy sector at 9:30. Thank you all.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning and welcome back. Thank you. Thank you. Hope everyone had a good break. Seems like lots of people have already checked in with our next guest, so I won't keep you waiting. We want to hear what he has to tell us. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background here. Todd Staples was reared in Palestine, the seat of government of his native Anderson County in East Texas. He entered public service in 1989 when he served on the Palestine City Council. In 1995, he was elected to the Texas House of Representatives and moved to the Senate when elected in 2000. Staples ran unopposed as the Agriculture Commissioner in 2006. In 2014, he was selected to head up the Texas Oil and Gas Association. So join me in welcoming Todd Staples with us this morning.
Thank you so very much. It's great to be with you today, Senators. Good to see you today. Thank you for your leadership and work for East Texas and all of Texas. You really are making a difference. It's an honor to see you here today. It's good to see anybody in Austin these days. You've kind of like tripled the economic activity on the meter here, kind of like your light bill last week during the winter storm, right? It's good to see you safe and warm. Jeff, good to see you today. Thank you for your work. You know, this room is full of leaders who have difference makers for Texas. I see, Laura, I see your work and your footprint. So many of you all over the place. Chief, we see you in leading our judicial process for our part of the state. And I can't thank you enough for what you do. You really make me proud to be a Texan. You make me proud the way that you persevere and come through difficulties. You understand how difficult it is to attract jobs and to grow jobs. And you recognize that people can have their businesses in any other state, in any other country in the world today. And that's why we will make certain that Texas is the leading state for job growth and business. And your work really makes that happen. Didn't Governor Abbott have an announcement yesterday about some new award that Texas got for the 197th consecutive year? No, it was like 19th, I think, something like that. Well, I'm tickled to be with you today. Gene and I were talking a little bit about how things sometimes change and sometimes they don't. It seems like every time I'm with a group of folks, we're talking about redistricting. That never ends, does it? I was not on the committee dealing with redistricting when I was in the Senate, when it started in 2003, and I was at home in Palestine working, which is a good thing to do, and it's hard to do when you serve and things are wild. But it was a Friday afternoon, and the Lieutenant Governor calls it. You know, the Lieutenant Governor calls Friday afternoon. That's great, right? Not so much. Todd, yes, sir. Look, Senator Bivens has got a family issue, health related matter, can't be on the committee. We need you to be on that. Great, put me in. I'm happy to help. Super. Be in Laredo at 9 a.m. in the morning. I said, Governor, I'm in Palestine. He said, look, I can't make all these hard decisions. I got to go. Bye. Life is, you have to be flexible in this business, don't you? I always love to say I represented a part of Texas that ran from Gun Barrel City to Cut and Shoot. And that kind of described the attitude of a lot of our constituents there. And it makes it fun. You know, the last couple of weeks was a real challenging time for Texans. It was very serious. A lot of people were impacted. My mother is 80 and she lost power for several days, out of water for several days. Her neighbors on her street, the same. My uncle, 82, and aunt, 29-year Navy veteran, would not leave his house. You know, that's just the way Texans are. They're going to make it. They're going to get through. And he did what he needed to do. And now I know the legislature has some decisions to make about some things that we can do to move forward. One of the things that we didn't know, Mary Elizabeth, was that if you are a critical load, you can designate yourself and then maybe you won't lose power so that you can continue to give power to other people. There's a lot of things that are coming out in this that you don't experience until you have a once in 100-year storm. And, you know, sometimes those storms come back to back and we won't have them again for a long time. But I'm confident that Texas can move forward, can be strong, can be resilient, and get the job done in a very meaningful way. And I know your input is very important to Senator Hughes and the rest of the East Texas delegation. I'm excited to be at the Texas Oil and Gas Association. It's kind of neat for Texas to be the energy capital of the world, and I'd like to keep it that way, folks. I think it means a lot in terms of security for our state, jobs. When I think about oil and gas, last year, they paid $13.9 billion in state and local taxes and state royalties that goes to fund things like public education, higher education. I know Commissioner Austin cares about highway funding. A lot of that money goes to fund our highway construction. In fact, our permanent university fund, our permanent school fund gets funding from the resources that are from oil and natural gas. And we want to make certain that those revenues are there in the future. I think the legislature used the rainy day fund to cover some very real needs like retired teachers and for state hospital systems just this last legislative cycle, which is very important to all of us as Texans. And we're glad that we could be there to continue that. We think that oil and gas has a very important role to play in the future. Many of our companies are sensitive to the concerns that people have about our climate, and they are focused on developing cleaner, stronger energy solutions for our future. You don't get to read about it a lot, but carbon dioxide emissions have declined significantly in the past couple of decades. In fact, in the US, we outpaced other countries that were in the Paris Climate Accord in carbon dioxide emissions last year. And we were all suffered the same situations, but the US led. Methane emissions have declined by 23% from oil and gas systems since 1990. And so when you think about our energy future, oil and natural gas will very much be a part of it. This last storm, if oil and natural gas hadn't stepped up and played the significant role that it did, millions and millions and millions of more Texans would have been shivering in the cold. Pre-storm, natural gas was about 19% of our energy mix for power generation. At the height of the storm, natural gas contributed 2/3 of the load. During the entirety of the storm, natural gas provided over 60% of the electricity generation mix for Texas. I'm glad we had natural gas in Texas last week for sure, I want to tell you. And the amazing thing is that natural gas is the reason the United States air quality is cleaner than it's been in a generation. Liquefied natural gas is improving the air quality all across the globe. We've got 2 LNG facilities in Texas right now, one in Corpus Christi and one in Freeport. And I know that we have 2 more that are actually under construction. So we may run out though. I don't know. I don't know if we have 200 or 300-year supply. I'm a little worried about that. I mean, this is the future. Now, does that mean that's going to be the future in 100 years from now? I don't know what's going to be here. Senator, you'll probably be here in 100 years. I probably won't be. But technology and innovation and research and development is the reason that we're so successful today. Innovation and technology is the reason that we've been able to overcome difficulties in our nation's past. And that same commitment and drive to learn more, to do better is alive and well in Texas today. And I think that's certainly going to carry us forward. And I think y'all see that in the Tyler community with the health center and UT Tyler coming together and forming this new effort. And it's going to be a phenomenal impact, and Texas will grow and we can make good things happen from that. So I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited about the role that oil and natural gas is going to play, because if you think about it, this has been the driver for building a better mousetrap that defines our, that's kind of a easy way to share our economic philosophy as Americans, don't you think? That started in 1776 and continues through today. We always want to build that better mousetrap. We always want to make it better. And I'm glad that oil and natural gas is certainly leading the way in doing that. They have made a commitment to a lower emissions future, a lower carbon future, but doing it the right way, having an all of the above energy approach and not having government mandates that picks winners and losers in the process that makes it harder and more difficult and more costly on consumers. But that's going to take all of us to have and demand a rational conversation about our energy future. And I think that you being here, taking time to come from East Texas to talk a little good East Texas common sense to Austin really does make a difference. And I appreciate you doing that very much. About 400,000 Texans had a direct job because of oil and gas last year. 1.7 to 2 million Texans had an indirect job and direct job combined. It still has a big impact on Texas. And for East Texas, natural gas exploration and production should continue for the foreseeable future. The facilities that are being added onto in the Beaumont area, the interconnected network that you have with other systems in East Texas is a real big difference maker. You know, if you really think about it, infrastructure is essential to our growth, right? We need roads, infrastructure. We need telecommunications infrastructure. One of the big reasons that our natural gas production in the field declined during this winter storm was lack of communications. We had one of our leading companies in Texas that his iPhone went down, his iPad went down. He finally commandeered his wife's iPhone that was on a different carrier and was able to reach his crews to get things going. And so, you know, infrastructure matters. Having infrastructure to move product to convenience stores near you to get them to a terminal where they then get trucked to a convenience store is essential to meet the growing population demands of Texas. Broadband internet for rural areas and for health outreach is the wave of the future, and we have to make certain that infrastructure is there. Making certain we have the pipelines that we need to move that product to power generation facilities is an essential element. To move it to the Texas Gulf Coast, to where we're exporting product and we're bringing dollars and we're bringing jobs back to Texas. This is really where we're at as a state and as a nation. And and I'm fixing to wrap up here, and I'll have to answer any couple of quick questions that you might have, but you would think some of the national debate really wouldn't be that alive and well in Texas, right? But there are policies that are being discussed at the state capitol that will drive jobs out of Texas. They will drive investment out of Texas. You know, it's hard to compete. We don't have a state income tax, and I'm happy about that. How about you? We need to keep it that way because that's really one of the defining things. And you would think that Texas is a low tax state because of that. But the business community in Texas actually pays about 63% of the total tax burden. And that you compare that to other states and it's about a 45% tax burden. And so if you're going to locate a big plant, even Tesla, and I'm okay with that. I like competition. I think it makes us all better. Aggies work really hard so that we can try to outshine our Longhorn buddies every once in a while. Can you believe COVID? I mean, the best chance we had ever of having a good football team and really doing well, and they just blew it all up. I'm not getting over this quick. I want you to know. This was our time. Where was I at? We pay too much in taxes to be competitive is what I mean. And this is my last point. Policies have consequences. And we've been able to attract some infrastructure matters. I mean, the fact that we had these blackouts, businesses are looking at that, and we need to have a plan. And I believe the legislature will correct some deficiencies that need to be addressed. No doubt about it. That'll be a signal to the business community to bring your jobs here. But our tax policy matters too. And I learned from Scott, my days on the Palestine City Council, working with Tyler economic development officials, Jeff and I talking about projects for East Texas all of our entire lives. It seems like it's so competitive to get these jobs here because they do an analysis and they look at their total burdens and where they should locate their plants. That means where do they locate their jobs? That means where do they locate their purchasing for all the families that will be brought to our area. And we're not competitive with Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida and some of these other states. And that's why we've got to look at this chapter 313 of the tax code to see what's reasonable to be done so that we can be competitive, but make it also fair for all the rest of businesses that we have. Aren't you glad these are all simple things? Listen, it's an honor to be with you. Thank y'all for letting me be here. I appreciate each and every one of you so much.
Gift for you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you so much.
And,
That's great.
It's a little heavy there, not sure,
Okay.
but there's some good goodies.
Oh, I
from
like goodies.
everyone.
Yeah, good. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. We're going to have another quick break, and then we are going to meet at 10:20 downstairs for a photo. We want everyone to join us. Our officials, please join us, and so we can commemorate this fantastic trip. So 10:20 at the staircase. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and head downstairs. Todd Jackson is going to get ready to take our pictures. So if you could start heading down to the bottom staircase, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, hello again. If we find our seats for our final session together for the finale of the time in Austin, and Governor Patrick, we've already talked to these folks about how of all the different groups, this was our group who resolved to make this work, to come to Austin and to then deal with all the challenges, and then having to move it for a week because of that little weather event that we all enjoyed. So it's good to be in Austin. It's been a profitable time. And so a couple of things. You all know our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick. Those of us who went to public schools in Texas and college, studied Texas government, and we learned how powerful the office of Lieutenant Governor is. There's a number of reasons for that, and we see that very true today. Now, a lot of politicians talk about leadership, and this group is a group that does leadership. Leadership isn't always popular, but that's where the real leaders show up. Let me give you a couple of examples. He didn't ask me to say this. In fact, he asked me to keep it short. But how many of us remember the significant reforms and funding for public education from the last session, right? We know how important that was. How many of us believe that the centerpiece to that teacher pay raise, money for good teachers in the classroom, is the most important piece? Did you know, it's been a while now, but you may recall before the session, it was Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who laid down the marker and said there will be a significant teacher pay raise for every Texas teacher. And I can tell you, I was in meetings with members of the Senate and the House. So I won't name names. Good folks who wanted to do some great things for public education said, Governor Patrick, we just don't have the money to do this great reform, and that big teacher pay raise. Can we back off on that? And he said, nope. There's going to be a significant teacher pay raise in that bill. He stuck to his guns. Of course, your delegation is for that. We supported that. One of the many things he's done quietly behind the scenes that folks don't know about, and it's good for Texas. It matters for Texas. You know, he's a successful businessman. He may talk about this. He is the one who brought Rush Limbaugh to Texas when he was in the radio business. That's timely now that we just lost Rush. But many things to say about a lieutenant governor, a father, a grandfather, a successful businessman. He cares about Texans and about making sure that the American dream is available to every Texan and broadening that circle of liberty and prosperity. He doesn't just talk about it, he lives it. We're blessed to have him. He's a frequent visitor. Of all our statewide officials, I don't know anybody who comes to East Texas as much as he does. We're thankful for him and so glad he arranged his schedule to be with us today. Governor, thank you for doing this. Many groups wanted to have you. We're delighted to have you with us. Please welcome our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick. Governor.
My hair was darker in that photograph. COVID, I'll tell you. You know, I've talked to a lot of groups and that are divided. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, rural and urban. I've never talked to people with power and without power. You're the first group. Some of you are split down the middle there, and we're going to fix it. I could spend an hour talking about what went wrong. We had incredible, almost 24 hours of hearings last week, and we will get to the bottom of what went wrong, and we will fix it. So that those of you without power, and I was one of those, thank goodness I had bought a generator about 8 years ago, but we lost power as well, and phone and water like everyone else, but not those of you in part of East Texas. So thank you for being here today. I'm so glad I'm not doing a Zoom call. This is good. It's good to see real people, not cardboard cutouts in the stadium. It's all good. By the way, everywhere I go in a Republican district, and if I'm in a Democrat district, you know, I always say nice things, because I'm respectful of the other side, but I'm always going to praise our members, because our 18 Republicans are on the front line of really what's the future of Texas is. 18 people, 18 Republicans. And Bryan Hughes is an absolute leader of the 18. And I don't say that just because he's here. He is dynamic. You know, he's a little bit of everything. And when he gets that podium, if you've watched him on the floor, he's on the front row. And he sat next to where I used to sit. I always liked being on the front row because, and I don't know if you did it for this reason, Bryan, but when you turn around, you can see all other 30 senators. If you're on the back row, if they're not turning around looking at you, you see the back of their heads. So it's nice to be able to look at all the people and speak to them directly. And he's like Perry Mason when he stands there, or Andy Griffith and Matlock. He's a little bit. Now, real quick, I won't take too much time on this, but I think most of you are familiar with the 21 vote rule. For those of you who aren't, or those who have forgotten, real quickly, through the entire history of the state, in the Senate, it only took a simple majority to pass the bill, 16 out of 31 senators. But you had to have 21 votes to bring a bill to the floor. That was 2/3, and we've never had more than 20 Republicans in the Senate. So when I came into the Senate in 2007, the 21 vote rule meant with the 20 Republican senators, we had to go to a Democrat every time and ask permission to bring a bill to the floor. Because that's why it was called the blocker bill. They just said, we're not bringing that pro-life bill up today. We're not bringing that Second Amendment bill up today. We're not bringing that cutting taxes, lowering, shrinking the size of government today. And so from the time I was a freshman until I became lieutenant governor, I fought to change that. And you say, well, how do you change that? The senators vote on the rules. So you have 31 senators, 16 senators change the rules. So when I got elected in 2014, thanks to you in large part, East Texas took care of me in the primary and the general. 8 other freshmen came in that year, and they all ran on changing the rule to 19. because you shouldn't let the minority party, as Madison called it, you can't let have my tyranny of the minority. We're the majority. You work hard to elect us. All over the state, Republicans work hard. So why were we yielding our power to them? So on the first day in 2015, my first day, the senators voted to change the rules to 19 to bring a bill before. We had 19. So that meant if you're a Republican, you had 18 other senators. If you keep your caucus together, you could bring any bill to the floor and the Democrats couldn't stop it. And one senator, Senator Lucio, is a Democrat from the Valley. He should really be caucusing with us, I think, because he's pro-life. Excuse me. He's pro-Second Amendment, pro-business, but we always had a cushion. But even if we didn't have Eddie, we had 19 Republicans. Well, what happened this time? So this time, Pete Flores lost his race by 10,000 votes along the border and near San Antonio. So we're down to 18. Thank you. Thank you, Bryan. So now what do we do? So I started calling the members, and thank you. And I started calling the members, and I said to the Republicans, we need to go to 18. And a few said, well, wouldn't that be political? I said, absolutely. Right, Bryan? Wouldn't it be political? And I needed 16 of the 18 to vote to change the rules to 18. Otherwise, the Democrats could have stopped every bill because we only had 18 of us. We only have 18, only 18 of you. And if the threshold stayed at 19, once again, they could block they would block election reform. They would block a lot of bills that you want us to pass. So Bryan is the chair. This lead up, so you understand what happened that day. And to lead up to this. So he's the chair of administration. He's now the chair of state affairs. Next to finance, arguably one of the most powerful committees. I put him there because I know I can trust him to get a lot of the bills that you want out of that committee. So I go to Bryan. So Bryan, you're the chair of administration because you don't name committees until the second or third day. But on that day, you still was chair of administration. It's your duty to carry this to the floor. And what was it? Is it 5/9, Bryan? So you want to just give them a 30-second explanation as if they were senators, how you were explaining this. So stand up here, just do that. Just give us a 30-second demonstration or 60 seconds.
Okay, so.
Pretend they're the senators, you're at your desk. Okay, you're making this case of why we're going from 19 to 18.
Okay. We know from the Constitution, from the debates our forefathers had, and from the rules we follow today, that most matters are handled by a majority. The majority rules. That's the basis of democracy. In Texas, we have a tradition of requiring a supermajority to get things done. That's important, but it's getting in the way. That supermajority requirement means that we don't get to call back into special session to do big things like election reform, like pro-life bills, like Second Amendment bills. And so the proposal today is to keep our supermajority requirement, but lower it to not quite as big a supermajority. And so it's still going to take more than just 50% plus one, but it won't take quite what it took before. And so as an aside, before it was 2/3, then it went to 3/5. Well, 18 out of 31, 18/31 doesn't have the same ring to it as a fraction. So it's 5/9. So we're the only.
So let me hit my red light. Excuse me, Senator, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll play the part of the dean of the Senate who's been there for over 40 years, John Whitmire. So the dean said, did you say 5/9?
Yes, Senator, 5/9.
5/9. And then he said, I'm quoting him exactly, and I want you to respond as you did. So you're trying to sell us that this is good for democracy and good for Texas and 5/9?
Yes, sir.
Would you be offended if I called you a snake oil salesman?
No, Senator, I would not. I'm a politician and a lawyer.
That was his answer. Thank you, Bryan. I mean, he did not miss a beat. And I'm sitting up there just laughing. I'm thinking, that was just a special moment. So we're at 18. So what does that mean to us? That means as long as we can get, if Bryan has a bill, if he can get 17 other Republicans with him, or if he loses one, a Democrat, we can move through our legislation. Let me tell you why this is important. So the lieutenant governor, by tradition, when I became a lieutenant governor, we'll have nearly 1,000 bills filed. And someone can file a bill that ends up, in the last couple of days, it's 947 or 1,260. It can still be a high priority. Sometimes it just takes a while to write it, file it, and they're just done chronological order. But the lieutenant governor holds back 1 to 20. So when I took over, from the former lieutenant governor, my first session, I kept it 1 to 20. And then I had so many requests from senators who all wanted a low bill number, because if they get a low bill number, it's special. It means I support it. It has a good chance of passing. So I increased it to 30 in 17 and 19. This year, I made it 31 only because we are redistricting this year. And so there are 31 Senate districts. So we made that bill, Senate District Bill 31. In 3 sessions, that's 20, 30, and 30 priorities. Out of the 80 bills that I set as priority, 79 passed the Senate. 79. And that one that didn't pass passed the following session. 79. Now, all of them didn't get through the House. All of them didn't get signed by the governor. Some of them we passed over there, and they sent us a House bill. Where's Cole Hefner? Your great House member. Where's Cole Hughes? I saw him around. Okay, just walked out when I said something nice about him. Never mind. No, he's a good guy. But let's say Cole had the same bill as Bryan has. Then we may take Cole's bill, even though it's the same language. So whether it was a Senate bill or a Senate or a House bill, 79 out of 80. So the power is there because we only required 19 votes in those days, and now 18 to bring a bill to the floor. Had we not had the 19 vote rule and allowed the Democrats to block, I would say of my 80 priorities up until this session, maybe half of them, maybe 2/3. So we do a lot of bipartisan work together because a lot of issues aren't partisan. But when it comes down to the issues that separate the parties, and my goodness, the parties used to be a lot closer. Let's face it, a lot of people in East Texas were Democrats, but they were conservatives. Now Republicans, because Obama really took the party and Hillary Clinton the other way. Now even Obama looks like he's middle of the road compared to Biden. They're stopping. Did you see the story today? The publisher of Dr. Seuss books is no longer going to sell Dr. Seuss books. They announced today, no more. Because the cancel culture has said that those books have a racist overtone. And these are books that your kids, my grandkids, I don't even like some of them. I didn't like reading some of them. But remember Ted Cruz on the Senate floor in his famous filibuster? He read Green Eggs and Ham. Wouldn't be allowed to do that anymore because that's bad. So my point is the difference between the parties on the matters that on the issues that matter, I think most to each side, is just now a Grand Canyon, just a Grand Canyon. So when it comes to border security, Grand Canyon. School education, Grand Canyon. Bail bond reform, Grand Canyon. Keeping thugs in jail, Grand Canyon. Protecting your Second Amendment rights, Grand Canyon. Protecting life, Grand Canyon. Religious liberty, Grand Canyon. And so we have to maintain that 18 vote rule. Someone jokingly said to me in the meeting, what happens next year if you lose one more and you're down to 17? I said, well, then I'll get Bryan to change it to 17. So really important. That allows us to do our work this session. So quickly, what are we focused on? Lots of things. Before the storm, and there's always every session there's a bill, right? There's not a bill, an issue that comes up that kind of takes the oxygen out of the room. And this is the main centerpiece. What we learned, for those of you on ERCOT, you'd be interested. Those of you who were not, probably don't care as much, except it impacts Texas. Here's the big lesson we learned. Lots of mistakes were made all around. Yesterday, I called for the resignation of the PUC chair, a very nice lady, and for the head of ERCOT. She has resigned. The president of ERCOT is still there, only because when we asked them questions in 9 hours of their testimony, we said, is there anything you would have done better? And they said, can't think of anything. Any recommendations to improve? Can't think of anything. And so do you realize that we came within roughly 5 minutes? This is like a bad movie starring, Tom Cruise or Matt Damon, one of these, where the clock was ticking down before the bomb went off, before James Bond got there. So I won't get into all the minutia here, but there's a level of frequency that we need so all the plants work together in harmony. And that frequency is around 60. That's the number. And if the number goes to 59.3 or 59.4 for 9 minutes, the entire grid shuts down. It all trips off. It all trips off to protect the equipment from catching on fire or exploding. At 1:30 at 9 o'clock at night, on Sunday night, on Valentine's Day, we were asking, or the public was demanding 69,000 megawatts of power, which is the most we've ever had a demand for in the winter. The all-time record's around 74,000. ERCOT had 74,000. So at 9 o'clock, all the lights were on. By 12:30, 1 o'clock, we started losing hundreds of generating facilities. And by around 1:30, that 74,000 megawatts was down to under 50,000. So that's why they have to start cutting the load, telling Encore or CenterPoint of the various companies that deliver the power to your house. And again, many of you weren't involved in that, but 90% of Texas is. So if we were in the dark right now, it would impact you whether you're on that system or not. So when they dropped, they sent out the orders. You got to shut down, you got to shut down, you got to shut down. The frequency dropped to 59.3% or 59.4. What is, I'm sorry? Cycles. I said percent, cycles. Was it 4 minutes? 4 minutes. If we had lost one more plant, our entire grid would have gone down. And what would that have meant to you? That would have meant no power anywhere in the state of Texas. Anywhere. 90% are in ERCOT. That's about 26 million people. Little water. And you say, well, how long would that be? Months. Weeks or months? 4 weeks? 2 months. That's how close we were. By the grace of God, a few plants kicked on at 1:30. I mean, we have it by the minute. If they had kicked off, but they kicked on, and we gradually made our way back. So that's why I don't take it lightly when I call for someone's resignation. But on Friday, ERCOT said, we're prepared, we're ready. In 72 hours, we were down to 5 minutes away. Can you imagine the whole state being dark? Nobody had water, no refrigeration, nothing. So that's why I've said, Bryan saw the video, my pastor asked me to speak at my church. So I go to Second Baptist in Houston and the Cowboy Church in Montgomery County. And Dr. Young asked me to come because all the members had questions. And I just said, look, we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to fix it. And I personally am going to carry this on my back. I'm working with the governor, working with the speaker. Obviously, they want to get it done as well. But the Senate's going to lead on this. And I will not let a bill come to the floor that doesn't fix these issues to the very best of our ability. We know there was an unprecedented storm. We could have handled some rollouts, brownouts, but we can't handle this and shouldn't handle this. So what's the other big lesson? And before I close, the other big lesson is here. Renewables are not reliable. So you've heard this number about, I was on Laura Ingram talking about this last week. You'll hear that in the state of Texas, about 25% of our energy is created by wind and solar. It's about 23% wind and 2% solar. Sometimes it can be as much as 40 or 50%. But that's when the sun is out and the wind's blowing. It's when the weather is nice. It's not when it's severe cold and dark and no wind, or in the heat of the summer when the wind stops blowing. So we needed the renewables last week or 2 weeks ago. And instead of producing their normal, I don't want to say normal, but an average of 14 or 15,000 megawatts for us, they were down to under 5,000 megawatts. At some point, they were down to less than 2,000 megawatts. So we have to take Texas back in the direction of reliable energy, and that's natural gas, that's nukes, and that clean burning coal. From 2010 to 2010, we added 20,000 megawatts of natural gas and some coal to our grid. Great. From 2010 to today, we've lost 4,000 megawatts of power because we've shut down coal plants at the federal urging and the craziness of the Green New Deal. So we've got to incentivize people to go into the business investing in natural gas plants here, because on Thursday, when power started really coming back, 68% of the state was running on natural gas because a new plant had been down, hadn't come back yet. So this is for all those in Washington. AOC said, well, if Texas had 3 times as much or triple the power, renewables, they would have had this problem. Okay, so we needed 69,000 megawatts, and we were getting, call it 5,000 megawatts from renewables. Okay, so 3 times as many, we had 15,000 megawatts. We'd all be in the dark. So this is a lesson for America and a lesson for Texas. And look, the renewables are a great part of our portfolio, because there are days in the summer where the wind's blowing so much and the sun's out 15 hours, where we don't have to use a lot of other generation. It's the way we can do it. But a piece of the portfolio, it's not something we can count on. It's something that on a nice day we can use. So that's the lesson here for America and for Texas. And we're going to steer this ship back in that direction. To go in that direction. So this session, a lot of big issues that's going to dominate a lot of this time. Election security, we have to have. Look, you hear all this rhetoric about the election. I don't know what the final vote count would have been, but I know this. When one party or the other, in this case it was the Democrats, when they go and count votes in the middle of the night with paper on the window so you can't see in, and no one closer than 15 feet, all you've done is bring suspicion upon yourself. That's what you've done. And when you say, as they did in Georgia, anyone can send in a mail-in ballot and we're not going to verify the signature, and they go from 5% of their vote to whatever the final number was, 15% being mail-in, I can guarantee you there were more than 12,000 votes that you would have been throw out, because you just have that number you throw out. So would it have been enough to flip the election? I don't know, but we're not going to let anybody count votes in the dark in Texas, and we're going to verify mail-in signatures. And I believe our count was right here. 99. I'm sure there are a few missing votes somewhere. But the difference was, and I don't know if you've thought about this, in Texas, and I was the chair of the Trump campaign in Texas, and as I was in 16. And I told the president, he called me a couple of days before the election. He said, "So Dan, I keep hearing this Texas is going to turn purple." I said, "Mr. President, you're going to win by 6 points. You're going to be good. Going to be good." So around 8:30 that night on election night, I get a call from the White House, not from him, but I can't remember which member of his staff called me and said, "The president wants to know, Dan, what's going on in Texas," because at that point he was down about 600,000 votes. And the reason is because in Texas, our systems require you to get the vote in timely. All of our votes were pretty much in by midnight. Well, the first votes that come in are from Dallas County, Harris County, Travis County, Bexar County, all the counties where he was losing 70-30. And I looked at my wife, we were sitting there watching the returns, just the two of us, and I like to keep track of everything. And I said, "Jan," I said, "that was the White House. He's wondering what's going on in Texas. He's 500, whatever the count was." He ended up winning by 700,000 votes. He turned the election around. And we didn't have to wait for 2, 3, 4 days or 2 weeks to count the votes when you have to figure out how many you need. It was an honest count. The difference was that first count where he was down, that was about 10 counties. By midnight, we had the other 244 counties. And when those votes came in from rural Texas, that's where the margin is. If you look at the map in America today, or in Texas, it's all red, except our cities and some of our coastlines. I mean, I think the president this election carried about between 237 and 241 of the 250 counties, 54 counties. When Greg Abbott and I ran in 18, I think we carried 241 out of 254 counties. But those big counties, I mean, I think in Travis County, the margin was like 80% Democrat, 20% Republican. So we have got to do a better party of two things. One is in rural Texas, we have got to remind voters they have to show up to vote, because sometimes a person will say, "Well, Bryan Hughes doesn't need my vote. Dan Patrick doesn't need my vote. They're going to carry Smith County or whatever county. They're going to carry the county. Or the president's going to carry it. Why do they need my vote?" Here's the reason. Because 244 counties have to make up the difference of those top 10 counties. So I told the president, there was an issue. We talked 3 or 4 times after the election before. I said, rural Texas came through as always. But that's how the states become. That's how America's become. And the difference of the president winning by a close margin or a large margin was he going to win rural Texas 70-30, 68-32, or 72-28? 2 or 3% when you add up across our state, our size changes the election. Last factoid to really prove that point. In 2018, Ted Cruz running against Beto O'Rourke. Gosh, I hope he runs for governor. Will that be just, when he comes and wants to take our guns and take our oil and gas? That'll be a good campaign. Very God will look forward to that. When Ted Cruz beat Beto O'Rourke in 18, Ted won by 200,000 votes out of almost 9 million. And 80,000 of those votes came to the one strong suburban county we still have, Montgomery County. He won that by 80,000 votes. So Ted won the rest of the state by 120,000 votes. So the difference of how Ted performed in rural Texas of getting 70-30 or 72-28 as opposed to 68-32 is the reason he's in the US Senate and not Beto O'Rourke. So I said 2 things. So always got to get everyone to vote. We have to drive up our totals in those areas. The second thing is we have to hold the line on our values that we know have made Texas strong and America strong. We're the America that all America used to be. So we cannot yield on those issues we believe, because I hear this a lot from some in our party. Well, you got to get back into that, got to get that city vote back. And if you're going to do that, you have to step back on their Second Amendment. You have to step back on that life issue. No, we have to go into those areas and tell them why we're right, that they should have their Second Amendment rights, why it's the right thing to protect life, not back to the middle and back away. Then we're no different than the Democrats. And the last point of evidence in that is in this election, Donald Trump flipped 7 counties in the Valley. Historically, Democrat counties, 90% Hispanic. 7 counties went for Trump. In Starr County, Trump lost the Hispanic vote 80-20 in 2016. Biden beat him this time 51-49. The Hispanic voters believe in smaller government, educational opportunities, low taxes, Second Amendment. Their faith means they believe in the sanctity of life and the family and religious liberty. And that's why, not only because it's the right thing to do, but for us to get the Hispanic vote to be Republican, which is the way we hold Texas forever and take back America, is we have to stand on those values. As Lieutenant Governor, you can be assured I will. I'm going to be running in 2022. It's going to be an interesting campaign for Lieutenant Governor, and so hope to have your support again. And we have a long way to go to get things right, but I really appreciate you coming. You're the heart, you're the backbone of our party in rural Texas, because groups like you all around the state, there aren't a lot. It's the old 80-20 rule. 20% of the people do all the work and volunteer, and 80% show up and vote on election day. But you're the 20% that gets that 80 there. So thank you all. I got to go back to work. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, Senator Hughes, for your time this morning. And thank you. Thank you to everyone that's joined us. How has yesterday and today been? It's been good. We've heard a lot of great speakers. And I'd like to thank our chambers that put this together. Thank you to Kilgore and Lindale, Tyler, and Longview. Thank you so much. One last thing I need you to do is put this on your plans for 2023. We're going to be back here, hopefully no masks and a lot more people. So thank you for your time. Thank you for making this happen. We want you to get home safely, and spread the word of what we've done here. And thank you to our officials for giving us their time this yesterday and today. So thank you, everyone. Safe travels, and be back here in 2023.
Thank you.